Welcome back to the Coaches Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Trey Belcher. With me, as always, my dapper tag team partner, Corey Smallwood. How's it going, Corey?
I'm going to have to Google dapper now. I'm doing all right.
Well, all you're going to see is a picture of you. So just know that's what it is.
Understood.
With us today is Greg Justice, owner of AYC, At Your Convenience Health and Fitness in Kansas City, one of the oldest personal training studios, not only in Kansas City, but also in the United States. Greg is a pioneer in the fitness industry. He is the author of several books, a member of the National Fitness Hall of Fame, and along with Jack LaLanne, the host of the LaLanne Pass It On podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Greg Justice. Welcome in, Greg.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all ours. And we talked in the intro there about AYC being one of the oldest training studios. It dates back, I believe, to 1986. Hold me to that. And so tell me some of the stories over these last 39 years. That's an incredible career. And it's been a successful one. I mean, your Hall of Fame plaque is behind you, and that's a testament to all you've done and accomplished and the people you've been able to help. So tell me some of the good stories. Tell me the genesis of AYC. Tell me the good and the bad, the things you've learned, the things you might do over again. Just take us through there. And if we get to 3 hours, then we'll cut it and we'll start episode 2 with you.
Yeah. Well, we are Kansas City's original personal fitness training center. And actually this very week, 39 years ago, AYC began. So we are celebrating our 39th birthday or anniversary this week as Kansas City's original personal training center. And I opened it fresh out of graduate school with no job and no money, but a big dream. And the beauty of it is that, as my original mentor in the industry, Jack LaLanne, said, anything is possible and you can make it happen. And so with that mindset, I made it happen. And here we are 39 years later, going stronger than ever, and with another at least 39 years ahead of us. So, we've just been blessed over the years. And it really got started when I was at a church garage sale and saw a book by a guy named Jake Steinfeld, Body by Jake. Some of you older fitness professionals will remember. He was a Hollywood personal trainer. And he would work with Steven Spielberg and Harrison Ford and all the Hollywood elites back in the early 1980s, late 70s and early 80s. And I saw that book in this church garage sale for 25 cents. And I could afford 25 cents. So I bought that book, and it really fascinated me because at the time I was working as a manager of a club here in Kansas City, and it was my dream job. It truly was my dream job. I was managing a facility. We worked with a lot of the professional teams in town. In fact, one of my first gigs with a professional team was the Kansas City Chiefs. And one of my longtime friends, Art Still is his name, was the number 1 draft pick of the Kansas City Chiefs back in 1978. And one of my very close friends today. And we've written 4 books together. So, those relationships last a long, long time, dating back to the early 80s. But I thought that was just the job that I was going to have forever, and I was just going to grow in it until one day I came to work and there was someone in my office bright and early in the morning, first thing in the morning. And the club had been sold to a new ownership group. And when I walked into my office, of course, the first thought in my mind was, this probably isn't a good sign. And it certainly was not, because the new owner was there. And, he was very cordial, and he just, got right to the point. He said, Greg, new ownership here, and I'm going to bring my own people in to run the gym. So your services are no longer needed. And I was a 24-year young man who had just been married for 6 months and was absolutely devastated because that was my dream job. But for the next 45 minutes, rather than just storming off and huffing and puffing and crying in my own tears, I realized I needed to protect the relationships that I had developed in that club. because they were my clients. Even though it was now his club, I had built close friends in that club and very close relationships. And so we spent the next 45 minutes laying out a game plan to transition from my management of the club to his people. And I think that kind of surprised him. I think it took him off guard that, I was willing to help him transition like that. But again, it wasn't done for him much as it was done for the people that I had developed the relationship with. So after that, 45 minutes, and we talked about how we could make it a smooth transition, I walked out the door and thought that I had, just lost everything. And I had just been married 6 months. My wife worked at a publishing company. We had just one car, so I had all day to think about how I was going to break the news to my wife that I no longer was employed. And again, all these scenarios went through my mind and trying to lay out exactly how I was going to tell her. And I think I probably had it pretty well laid out of how I was going to do it. And of course, none of what I had planned to say actually came out because I was just distraught. But the coolest thing happened when I picked her up from work and told her, and she just kind of looked over kind of matter-of-factly and said, "It's okay. Now is your opportunity to go back to college and finish your graduate degree." I had dropped out of college with 1 semester to go on my master's degree to take this job and get married. So, she's like, "Go back, finish your graduate work. And then when you come back, you can do what you've always dreamt of doing, start your own business." And it was like the weight of the world was just lifted off my shoulders to have that kind of support. And now next month, we will celebrate our 40th anniversary. So, she's just been my rock and support for all of these 40 years. So I went back to college and finished my graduate work that semester. And there's a funny story that goes along with that because, again, we had just been married 6 months at the time that I got fired. This was Christmas, just before 3 weeks before Christmas that I got fired. And so after I'd lost my job, the next day I called my graduate professor back in Kentucky. And I said, "I know this is a long shot. You're 3 weeks from starting the next semester, but I want to come back. And is there any position anywhere in the exercise science department?" He said, "Greg, you're not going to believe this. Just yesterday, the same day that I was fired, he said, my graduate assistant took another position at the University of Kentucky. If you want it, it's yours. It'll save me the hassle of having to go out and deal with getting a new graduate assistant." And so it's just like, I'm a man of faith. I don't believe in coincidence. And so I think that was open for me. And I believe it was. Then, so everything was all set. And then a funny thing happened the day after that. The gentleman that fired me called and said, "Greg, I made a mistake. So many of our clients have come to me and insisted that you come back." And now I had a dilemma because I had already accepted the graduate assistantship position, and he wanted me back in my dream job. But I knew I was going to go back to college. I knew I was going to go finish my graduate work. So I had to think quick. And I don't like burning bridges. I think sometimes people do that too quickly. And I just don't think it's a good solution to most problems, right? So I had to think quick on my feet. And I said to him, I said, "Okay, here's what I'll do. I've already accepted a position to complete my graduate work. It'll take me 5 months from January to May. And then I'll come back and I'll come to work for you if you'll let me start a business within your business." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, there's this new concept. It's being worked out around the country. Of course, it started in LA and New York, kind of working its way to the Midwest, personal training." And explained to him what it was. And he's like, it kind of got quiet and I didn't have anything else to say. It seemed like forever. It was probably only 15 seconds of silence. But he said, "Okay, Greg, here's what we'll do. If you'll come back, I'll let you do that. I'll let you start that personal training business in my facility, and I'll even become your first client." And so had I burned that bridge, think about the curve that it would have taken me to start my business coming fresh, out of graduate school with no job, no money, and nowhere to do this. But now, all of a sudden, in a 2-day period of time, I had gotten the most devastating news that I could get. I'd lost my job. I'd been accepted to my graduate program back to, and that pays for room and board, so I could afford that. And I was able to come back to that position that I wanted and start my own job in his facility with a client. And it was just crazy, the whirlwind that 2 days can come with, right? So I spent that 5 months, my last semester of graduate work, building out a 5-year business plan for At Your Convenience. That was my differentiator to the club industry back then. I'll go to your home, you come to my club, at your convenience, early morning, late night, whatever. That was how I was going to differentiate myself from the rest of the industry here in Kansas City. And when I got back, and this week in 1986, I started At Your Convenience, personal fitness training in that gym that I was fired from. And it has been nothing but an amazing ride. And it all came from that 25-cent book that I bought at a garage sale that taught me the business of personal training. Now, he was charging $250 an hour. I'm sorry, $250 a half hour in the late 70s and early 80s in Hollywood. I knew that wouldn't fly here in Kansas City. So I had to kind of scale that back. And my rate started at $25 an hour. And now I'm up to $140 an hour. So a little bit has changed in those 39 years. But it's been nothing but an amazing ride and a blessing beyond blessings to have the career that I've had up to this point. And truly, I feel like there's so much more to do. It's just been an amazing ride.
With 40 years experience, Greg, there aren't many people in the industry that have that longevity. I tell people that I've been in it for 28 years and they're like, holy cow, there are a lot of coaches out there that aren't 28 years old. And so tell me, when you got into the industry and you're seeing like there is no personal training. I know there are a lot of people who go, wait, that started in like the 1800s, right? So in 1980, what were the trends that were happening? There weren't boutique gyms. There were aerobics that people were doing at the gymnasium at the elementary school. And then you had your big giant gyms. Like, what were some of the trends that you were kind of getting involved in the mid to late 80s?
Well, that job that I had, it was a club of high intensity training that came from the professional ski world. So we were training high level athletes with high intensity training. Now they call it high intensity interval training. It didn't have a name back then, but it was kind of starting to come into vogue back then. What you had back then was you had the old school dumb guy weightlifters, and I would put myself into that group. And you had the aerobics world, and you had joggers or runners, and the tennis racquetball world. That was kind of what you had back in the 70s and 80s. And what was happening is those worlds were starting to interconnect. And back in the day, they used to say, never mix weightlifting and cardio together. And I came from the world of wrestling and judo, which if you have ever been in a wrestling match or a judo competition, you'll know that it is a combination of resistance training and cardiovascular work at the same time. So what the industry was telling me didn't make sense. And of course, all the science and all the research hadn't been done yet. But it was starting to be developed. They were starting to learn more and more, and those worlds were getting more and more interconnected. And finally, the industry has caught up to understanding that there is that metabolic resistance training, bringing the worlds of resistance training and cardiovascular together that a lot of us instinctively already knew coming from our athletic background. And so it's kind of nice to see the industry evolve to that metabolic resistance training being of value. And even my original mentor, Jack LaLanne, always talked about not leaving a lot of time between sets in weightlifting. And a lot of bodybuilders didn't like that at all because they couldn't build a lot of mass. They felt that way. But so, I learned so much from just my instinctive background from athletics. And then, of course, the teaching of Jack LaLanne, who is, of course, as we all know, the Godfather of fitness, and a brand that I am very closely associated with to this very day. I do all the social media for the brand, and I'm helping in a consulting role with the movie that Mark Wahlberg is working on, and just so many things like that. So I'm just, again, fortunate and blessed to be part of that brand.
How did you get involved? How did Jack become your mentor? How, you're so entwined, but I'd like to know how that all got started.
Well, it goes again all the way back to the early days of fitness, because that book that I got from Jake Steinfeld, Body by Jake, he also was mentored by Jack LaLanne. And so a lot of us that came in from that late 70s to early 80s, we kind of grew up with the only mentor that was ever before us in the industry was Jack LaLanne. So all of us kind of learned from Jack. And of course, seeing him at conferences and conventions and reading all of his books and all of the works that he has done just was what tied into my philosophy. And then back in 2015, 16, 17, I started to get to know the family better. Jack passed in 2011, and LaLanne and I were inducted into the National Fitness Hall of Fame the same year in 2017. And so we just developed a close relationship and have just gotten much closer over the last 10 years. And, it's a passion project for me because I do a lot of speaking to the industry. And I always talk about at the end of one of my talks called Treadmill Talks about legacy and how we can leave a legacy of change by just touching one person's life. And I always talk about Jack LaLanne and his legacy. And when I do, over the course of the decade or so that I was doing that talk, I noticed each year more and more in the audience kind of looked like they had no idea who I was talking about. And that really bothered me, that they didn't know the godfather of the modern fitness industry, the guy who invented the leg extension, the weight selector unit, the calf raise machine, the original foam roller. People don't know that. And I'll show you some of this stuff. I've got it in my office here. I'll show you some of this stuff here in a minute. But so I reached out to Elaine and I said, Elaine, this is really bothering me. I really want to do something to make sure this next generation knows who Jack LaLanne was and what he did for this industry. And she grabbed my arm and looked me in the eye, and it gives me chills every time I think about it, because she grabbed my arm and looked me in the eyes and said, Greg, all I want is before I go to the next expression of life, is for people to know what Jack did for this industry. And I said, we've got to write a book. We've got to write a book that showed all of his feats of strength, all the amazing things that he did, and all of the inventions that he created that he never patented, never made a penny off of, and literally left billions of dollars on the table for not patenting. But he didn't care. His sole mission was to help people help themselves. And so that is the mission that I am on now, to make sure that his mission is fulfilled and his legacy continues.
And I am 100% on board with that, Greg. I try to preach to even my team. It's like, you have to, in order to know where you're going, you have to know where we've come from. And in this day of social media where everything's going so fast, I think that this next generation of coaches aren't getting exposure to that, from Bob Hoffman to Jack LaLanne to Augie to all of the pioneers that have got us to where we are. It all started somewhere. And you're from, with your judo background, my martial art background, the legacy, that lineage we learned about our former masters and grandmasters. I mean, Jack LaLanne was a grandmaster of fitness, if we're going to put it in martial art terms. And I think it's so important to preserve these legacies in history so that the next generation of coaches understand where all this came from.
Yeah, I think that's important. And if you think about, all of the amazing feats of strength and endurance that Jack did before he got known for his television career, which spanned 34 years. But before that, he was doing all these feats of strength and endurance. And you think about all of these quote unquote influencers on Instagram and social media. Jack was the original influencer. Jack was the original personal trainer because he got on TV in 1951 and started a television show where he got on that one camera set, looked people in the eyes through that camera, and was able to connect and became the original personal trainer, the original virtual trainer. With COVID, everybody went into virtual training. But again, Jack just started everything, and we have to know where we learned all of this from, and so much of it comes from Jack.
Yeah. I was just reading to one of my staff and about some of the feats you talked about. And one of the ones that popped, I was going through, the web and going over some of them. He swam from Alcatraz to San Francisco's wharf handcuffed. It's one thing to swim it. It's a whole nother thing to do it while being able to really use your arms. Just crazy stuff that today, if you had an influencer do it, you'd be like, no, that's just absolute ludicrous. Why would anybody do that? But he
actually did that multiple times. The first time he did it when he was 41, and he did it again when he was 60. Let's top that off and go to when he was 70 years old. And he swam 1.5 miles in the Long Beach Harbor with his hands handcuffed and his feet shackled, pulling 70 boats with 70 people 1.5 miles fighting cold current in the Long Beach Harbor. Think about that. He was 70.
Yeah. And that plays into, and I kind of want to get into kind of what's going on with your life too, is he always talked about, great nutrition and the importance of movement at any age. And he not just talked about it, he exhibited it. And I think that's why he did some of these feats of strength is people would go, oh, I can't do that, I'm too old. I can't do that, I'm too old. And Jack did it. I mean, Jack proved everybody wrong at any age. He was always, take your vitamins, get your food, drink your water, all the things that we now preach as coaches today, he was preaching and living back then. And you're living it, in your own life now, doing some crazy Jack LaLanne feats of strength and endurance yourself.
Well, all of the things that I have done with regard to that are all, in respect to what Jack did and inspired by Jack. Starting when I was 40, because that's kind of when Jack started doing, because way back in the day, he was born in 1914. So back in the day, 40 years was an old man. So he started doing these, feats of strength and endurance to prove, no, look, I have vitality, I have strength, I have endurance, look, and so he did that for that reason. So I kind of followed suit. And when I turned 40, I came out of, 20-year retirement from judo. And came back and actually won the Kansas state title in judo. When I turned 50, I flipped a 450-pound tire 50 times consecutively. I think we did it in like 9 minutes or something, and to raise money for our local children's hospital. When I was 60, I did 60 American Ninja Warrior obstacles back to back to back. And then we're planning another one for my 65th birthday this year. So again, all of it inspired by Jack, and for the same reason, to prove that age is not a barrier to performance. If you fuel yourself right, and I don't mean just nutritionally, I mean spiritually, physically, nutritionally, and then of course mentally. I call those the 4 Ls: spiritual, mental, physical, and nutritional. But so I think if you feed your body those 4 Ls, then you'll be just fine.
I always write notes, and I put on here Jack LaLanne, the second act. Being the junior member here, my introduction to Jack LaLanne was through the infomercial, the juicer infomercial.
Yes.
And that's how I learned about Jack, and then had to go back and do my homework. And you being 64, getting ready to turn 65, just getting started with your second act. If you're following Jack, you got another 30 or 40 years, good years in you. And tell us about, and you touched on it a little bit, tell us about what the initial part of the second act is and where you're going with it.
Well, so, in the early days of the personal training business, the blinders were on, and I was solely focused to that, to growing that business, to making it everything it could be, building long-term relationships. A little side note there, my average client has been with me for 35 years. So, it's like when you talk about a business and you think about our industry and so many 12-week programs, lose 30 pounds in 30 days, drop 50 pounds in 12 weeks, all that stuff. That, in my mindset, is such a superficial thing, because fitness is life. It's a lifetime. It's longevity. You're not training for an event per se. You're training for independence, to be able to have independence throughout your whole life. You're training for health span, not necessarily lifespan, making sure that however long we're fortunate to be on this earth, that it's healthy and productive. And so the first act was me just building relationships and growing that personal training business to serve others, right? And so about 15, 20 years ago, I felt like I'd gotten to the point where I could start to explore that quote unquote second act, as you're talking about, which is, what can I do to serve a greater purpose, a greater audience? And so I started writing more, and I started speaking more, and finding other opportunities to serve more. And I've always believed in having mentors to lead you along the way. They tell you things sometimes you don't want to hear but need to hear. And I'll give you some examples of that, starting with my personal training business. So I had a business mentor who also ran a couple of the local sports franchises here in Kansas City. And when I took my business plan to him, now, almost 40 years ago, he looked at it and shaking his head and going along with it. And then at the end of it, he just kind of sat back and looked at me and said, "Greg, here's what I'll tell you. After reviewing all of this business plan, you're at a great age to fail." And I just kind of took a deep breath. I'm like, "What does that mean?" He said, "Well, you're 24 years old." He said, "If this thing completely blows up on you after 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years," it was a 5-year business plan. He said, "If it blows up on you at any point of this process, you've got the rest of your life to get back on track." And it's like, okay, that was pretty good advice. So it's like, go for it, go all out, do whatever it takes and make it work, right? And if it doesn't, you can recover. So that's one of the stories early on. Another one I was on in August of 1986, I was on the biggest radio show here in Kansas City. Radio shows aren't as big these days, but back in the 80s, it's a pretty big deal. And so I was on the top rated radio show here in Kansas City with the number one host in the area. And he sat about 3 feet away from me, smoking a big cigar, blowing cigar smoke my way and kind of smiling at me and telling me stories about how a business like this could never work in Kansas City. He said, "You're going to have to move to New York or move to California because Kansas City is way too conservative for a business like this to ever be successful." That's the second story. The third is my wife, of all people. So I show her my business plan. She's a journalism major. She breaks things down. She's very good at editing and understanding. And as she's reading through this business plan, I can tell this isn't quite the business she thought I was going to. She always knew I wanted to have my own business, but this wasn't quite what she thought it would be. And after kind of learning about what I had proposed, she looked at me incredulously and said, "And people are actually going to pay you for that?" And now, in fairness, that's 40 years ago. Personal training as an industry did not exist. And so she gets it these days. It has put our 3 kids through college, and it has given us a life that we are both blessed to have. And it's also opened the doors, kind of a good little segue here, into that second chapter. Because of the success of AYC, it allowed me to start exploring other opportunities. And one of my mentors along the way is a guy named Todd Durkin. A lot in the industry will know who Todd Durkin is. Now, Todd is 10 years my junior, so he's 10 years younger than I am. But there are people in your life, wisdom isn't necessarily just age, right? I mean, with age does come a certain amount of wisdom, but there are some people that are wise beyond their years. And Todd is one of those people. He has a great feel for our industry, the fitness industry. He has a good 35,000 foot view. He can look down on the industry and see trends, see things that need to happen. He came to me one day and said, Greg, you have written X number of books. I think maybe it was 8 or 9 books at the time. He said, you've written those books and clearly you have a system in doing so. And I said, yeah, I've got a very systematic process. It's a 7-step process. And he goes, do me a favor, write those 7 steps out for me. I want to talk to you about them. So I didn't know really where he was going with this, but I wrote those 7 steps out. We sat down and got on a whiteboard and started laying out what would now become, as you can see the poster behind me, Scripter Publishing Group, which was founded. We did our due diligence in 2016, started January 1 of 2017. We are now 400 books into publishing, and what was originally going to be a fitness publishing company turns out to be well more than half of our books outside of the fitness industry. We do a lot of Olympians. We do a lot of professional athletes. We do a lot of reality TV stars, a lot of self-help books, a lot of things completely outside of the fitness industry. And it was all because Todd came to me and said, with this 7-step process, I want you to create a presentation and start speaking to the fitness industry on how they, the industry, can write their books to share their knowledge with the world. And I'm like, God, I've got a full-time job. I don't need another one. I didn't say that to him, but that I've told him since I told him that was my initial thought. It's like, I don't have time to do that. But once we started to research the industry, and we found that 9 out of 10 fitness business owners wanted to write a book. They just had no idea where to start. And guess what? Greg had a 7-step process that if you go to my scripterpublishinggroup.com website, it is still what we use today for 400 authors that we have published and many more in the pipeline. So again, having a mentor see a gift that I had that I didn't see to be able to serve the industry, not only has served the industry, but again, has served Greg and has served Greg's family more than I could have imagined. It opened up the opportunity for me to be a part owner I didn't even do this intentionally, but Endless Rope, which is a fitness equipment company, the original scalable rope climbing machine. And it's a hydraulic scalable rope climbing machine that everyone from 99 all the way down to the highest level of professional athlete can get an amazing workout on. So I know that sounds like a commercial, not intended, but it's an amazing product. My second act that's kind of my second act now with the publishing company and Endless Rope. And certainly we're growing the awareness of the LaLanne brand. So we'll call that second act 2.1. So we've still got a long way to go.
Well, I believe that totally. And now with your own personal fitness and your own personal fitness endeavors, we'll say. Now, is this what you're getting into with the Ninja Warrior stuff? Is this 2.2? Is this 2.3? Where on the scale are we with all these things? Because I have a feeling we may get to like 6 or 7 by the end of it.
Well, I'm fascinated by this whole American Ninja Warrior training because it was by total accident that I got into it. And it was two lightning rods that hit me at the same time. See, back in about 2018, it was our second or third year in business with the publishing company. One of our authors, his name is Daniel Gill, still a good friend. In fact, he was on my sideline when I did my run at American Ninja Warrior, but he won the 2020 season of American Ninja Warrior. So he is literally one of the top American Ninja Warrior athletes ever, and it continues to be today. But we published his first book, and at the same time, we had a young lady that came to our gym and who was an OCR racer, an obstacle course racer, and she was trying to get a program developed. And one of my trainers came to me and said, Greg, I don't know anything about this OCR training. And I'm like, how hard can it be? Don't worry, I'll take care of her. I'll work with her. And so I started to talk to her and get to know her. And I said, I want to go to your gym with you and I want to see what you're doing now. Well, it just so happened that she trained for OCR at a ninja gym here in Kansas City. And the ninja gym is about 5 minutes from where I live. I had no idea. But again, all these coincidences, which I think I said earlier, I don't believe in coincidences. So I went and watched her train. And first of all, I'm thinking, I want to try this. I'm just like a 4-year-old kid watching her thinking, that looks like so much fun. And so she asked me halfway through the workout, do you want to try this? And I'm like, of course. Before she finished asking me, I was swinging on the bars. And it was more fun than I can even tell you. And I was so bad at it. And I saw the potential for a new challenge for Greg at almost 60 years of age when I started, because now I'm almost 5 years into it. And it truly was so much fun. But I wasn't very good initially. And the cool thing is year over year, over the last 5 years, I have progressively gotten better and doing things that I would have never imagined myself being able to do physically. But it all starts with the mental part of it, is being able to break through of you can do this rather than can you do this? And the truth is I can. And even with about 3 years ago now, I took a fall on one of the obstacles and landed half on a mat and half off and broke my ankle and shattered it pretty good. And I've got some nice little hardware down in my left ankle to prove that. And I lost about a year of training because of it, of specific ninja training, I should say, because what it did for me in that year that I couldn't do ninja training is I just happened to have this company that I owned called Endless Rope, that I was able to put my foot up on the bar and climb endless hours, strengthening some of the things that were then going to benefit me when I got back to my ninja training. So it's like what I thought could potentially have been a big loss turned into a huge gain because I came back with more confidence in my upper body pulling and stuff, which if you've ever seen the ninja game, you're, supporting your body weight for a very long time on bars. And so it was truly a blessing that I quote unquote, lost that year of specific ninja training, but got better at ninja because of it. And now I'm back to 100% with my ankle. Of course, we're 3 years away. And then had the good fortune of being selected for the 2025 season or season 17 of American Ninja Warrior and ran the course. And truth be told, and I've told this to probably more people than care to hear about it, but I had more fun than a grown man should be allowed to have. And if they called me right now during this interview, I'd have to excuse myself and go back and do it again.
Yeah, it's crazy that and were you at 64, almost 65 years old, one of the oldest competitors there, or did you see others
certainly on my night when I ran, which is scheduled right now for episode 3, scheduled for June 19th of 2025. I was the oldest in my group of 80. And I don't know if in the other groups, they had, 3 or 4 groups of, I think, 80 in each group. I don't know if there were any older, but I was certainly one of the 3 oldest in the entire season.
That's absolutely amazing. If you go to your social media, pages, you'll see you doing some of these and practicing some of these obstacles. And it's incredible. There's no way, if I showed this to any, person walking down the street and said, how old do you think this man is? There's no way they're saying in his 60s. And that's a testament to how you live your lifestyle.
You're kind to say that. I appreciate that. I will tell you this, and you'll see a lot of them on my social media pages too, because I'm not afraid to show my failures. And this is a sport with a very high failure rate, and I fall a lot.
Yeah.
But that's how you learn.
That's how you learn. That's right.
So what do you think Jack LaLanne would have thought about American Ninja Warrior?
Jack LaLanne would have been an amazing Ninja Warrior. His strength to weight ratio was off the hook. This is a guy who did 1,000 pull-ups and 1,000 push-ups in an hour and 22 minutes. Think about that.
Yeah.
He would have been perhaps the best ninja there ever was. He loved to climb rope. He was quite a great gymnast. Every sport that he did, he was successful at. A lot of people don't know this. He was actually selected for the 1936 Berlin Olympics on the wrestling team. A lot of people don't know that. But because he had started his gym in that same year and was getting money for services, back then they didn't allow quote unquote professionals to be. Yeah. Exactly. And so they kicked him off of the Olympic team. But yeah, he was going to be in the Berlin Olympics in 1936 for wrestling.
Yeah, everybody that talks about David Goggins and the feats that he's able to do, I always look and be like, do you know of this guy, Jack LaLanne? Because he's the originator. He's the one that started it all.
Yeah, he's the one that kind of laid the blueprint for all of us to follow.
It's fortunate that there is video evidence of him doing these things, because some of them are so incomprehensible that you would go, that's an urban legend. That's a myth. There's no way. And yet you go to the footage, which I'm sure you and Elaine and, have curated all of this, but it's absolutely spectacular.
Yeah. And we have to be careful. We're getting more aggressive on putting some of it out there, but we have to be respectful of the upcoming documentary and feature film with Mark Wahlberg starring as Jack. So we can't put too much out, but yet we are going to start to put some of it out, some of the clips. But yeah, it is incomprehensible when you think about some of those amazing feats of strength and endurance. And I just can't wait for the world to see through the documentary and then Mark's feature film who Jack LaLanne was and what he did for fitness.
Well, amen. And we're all looking forward to that. And I don't think there could have been a better protege to carry on the legacy of Jack LaLanne than you, Greg. And I was watching some of those videos, and the video of you on the pegs and then transitioning to the little fingertip,
to the little red,
the red
fingertip grip. Yeah, Greg, that's damn near impossible. It's also challenging.
Well, I mean, you think about it. Here's another interesting thing people don't realize. One of the other reasons, because in my practice, the personal training practice, I study longevity. And I want my clients, again, I mentioned the average client has been with me 35 years. So some of them are well into their 90s. And there's a correlation between balance and longevity, and there's a correlation between grip strength and longevity. And grip strength isn't just horizontal gripping, vertical gripping, and then that fingertip gripping from those handles that I think the video you're talking about. So if you can develop and maintain good grip strength, that correlates to longevity and balance and longevity. And that's what that whole doggone sport is about, is balance and grip strength. So, I just feel like I'm having way too much fun for something to be so good for me.
Yep.
And
love it.
And also in the video, and you talk about your falls, there's one still shot of you coming off of those wheels. You hit the first one, you hit the second one, and then the still shot of you, inverted. And then scroll down, you see the video of you just whip it, just lawn chair, full on. But there's also a lot to be said as far as longevity about resilience and the ability for you to take care of your body, keep your body trained through your 4 hours so that you can take a fall like that, even though it's on a mat, but you can take a fall like that and pop right back up like it never happened and jump right back on the wheel.
Well, and the truth be told is that one obstacle, and that was one of the owls, that was the mental game, because I've done that one more times than I can tell you about. But for whatever reason, it was a Monday morning, and for whatever reason, making the transfer from the first to the second, I was hesitating up here. Physically, I knew I could do it. I had done it, but for whatever reason, I was halfway committing to it, and I released in a bad position because my mind wasn't letting me do what physically I knew I could do. And so that was a total example of making sure that, you have to practice those things every day. You have to practice the physical every day. You have to practice the good nutritional every day, the spiritual every day, and certainly the mental every day, because you're not firing at 100% on all of those all of the time. And so it is constant, ongoing, everyday process.
And luckily for you, you were at a great age to fail that day.
Well played. Well played. Yeah.
Oh, too much.
Well, Greg, I'm going to tell you this. When Corey sent me the communication that you were going to be on, he said, you're going to love him. And he was 100% right. And one of the beautiful things about what we do, and I want you to talk here in just a second about your podcast and where we can find any and all of your information. And I'll throw a plug in at the end, but it's the connections, the connections with people. It's the connections with the people that you've had on average for 35 years. You think about all the milestones that you've reached with these people that have nothing to do with fitness. Fitness is the foundation. It's the thing that brought us all together. But so much of what we do in this business has nothing to do with fitness. It is just the human component, the connections that we build, and the caring and the respect and the love and the trust and all of those things, the family that you build. And it's been great to sit here and listen for the last 55 minutes, and it's flown by, and I could go another 55 minutes listening to more stories, but it's a testament to you and the vision that you had in your 5-year plan, the vision that you had coming out of college or coming out of your seeming dream job to say, this is what I want to do, and this is how I want to impact people, and this is how I want to build a full life, not just a business, but a full life through fitness. So I think it's a huge testament to everything that you've been able to do over these last 40 years.
Well, thank you very much. This has been absolutely my pleasure, and I love sharing stories. And, my wish is for the next generation of trainers to learn from the past and, and to continue to pass it on to their next generation. And speaking of the podcast, you had mentioned the LaLanne Pass It On podcast. That was not something that I ever intended to do, but Elaine, at 98 years of age, when she called me, she said, Greg, I want to start a podcast. And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. I mean, how many 98-year-olds are starting podcasts? I said, I will be happy to promote it on any of my social channels, and you just tell me how I can support you anyway. And she said, no, you don't understand. You're going to be my co-host, and you don't say no to the First Lady of Fitness. And so suddenly I am the co-host of the LaLanne Pass It On podcast. The name Pass It On comes from Jack, who always told his mentees, he said, I don't want anything in return other than for whatever you've learned from me, pass it on. And so that's why we call it the LaLanne Pass It On podcast, because we are passing on to the next generation the wisdom of people that we interview that are in fitness, in other industries, but they're passing on legacy to the next generation.
Where can we find it?
It is currently on YouTube. And if you just Google LaLanne Pass It On podcast, it'll appear on YouTube. We're going to spread out to other platforms eventually, but we're just figuring this whole game out.
Understood.
And then, of course, I always promote it on the LaLanne social media pages, which is Jack LaLanne Official on Facebook and Official, I think, Jack LaLanne on Instagram. And then my social pages on both Instagram and Facebook are Greg Justice on. And, I just share coaching tips. Today, I just did one on nutrition, and I share fitness, nutrition, mindset tips, and of course, I show some behind the scenes physical training, and you'll see me fall a lot. And every now and then make a successful run at something.
Yeah. And when can we watch your American Ninja Warrior episode?
I'm scheduled for the 3rd episode, which will air on June 16th. Now, the season debut of the show is June 2nd. And if you've seen the commercial, I was excited to learn last Friday that I actually made the commercial. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah,
So
I shared that on my social media clips. Awesome. When you put that up there. But yeah, that's so cool. I'll be sitting with my daughters love it. And I'll be sitting there and being like, hey, you should go check out Daddy's podcast because he was on.
And when I get up on stage, you can just point and say, it's the guy with the cane, right?
You don't even have a gray hair on your head, Greg. That's why I'm wearing my hat. If I had a head of hair like that,
maybe a little on the side there, but you're doing okay.
Well, and to wrap it all up, there was one clip that you put out the other day, and it was about being intentional. And I want you to close us out here talking about being intentional and how it has benefited your career and what it really means to you to be intentional. And it doesn't have to be fitness. It can be about your family. I know you talked about your wife and everything she's been such a rock for you, but take us out about being intentional.
Yeah, well, I think everything in life, what I would consider a successful life, starts with fulfilling and having a purpose. And that doesn't mean you're always on a linear path toward purpose because, you get off track every now and then. But having that ultimate purpose is like a GPS system that gets you back on that path, right? The only way to do that, I believe, is with everything in life, whether it be your spiritual relationships, your family relationships, your business, everything you do in life, you need to go at it and be intentional. You don't want to just throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. You've got to have a plan and you've got to be intentional about making that plan work. And if you just go and work out and start playing, you're not going to have as much success if you've got a goal and are intentional about that. It's the same thing with your nutrition. You've got to be intentional about what you eat, when you eat, why you're eating it. Intentionality. And in my relationships, again, both with my family and my God, I'm very intentional. And that's because it's a purpose-driven life. So I think everything that you do, there should be intention behind it.
Very well said.
We appreciate you coming on, and you're welcome here anytime to tell stories. If you got something going with the LaLanne stuff, and we can follow up if after the Ninja Warrior, but you're always welcome here, and we appreciate you for coming on, man. This has been a great way to spend an hour for me personally.
Well, yeah, I appreciate the invitation, and I would be happy to come back after the show airs at some point, and we can talk about that. Yeah. We can talk about all those experiences, and we've got some cool stuff coming with the LaLanne brand and so many other things. So, yeah, we'll just put a pause on this episode and say there'll be more to come because we got a lot more to come.
We'll have Act 2 coming up.
Perfect. Well, we thank you for joining us on the Coaches Unscripted podcast. We hope today's stories have inspired and empowered you. Please connect with us on Instagram at Coaches Unscripted Podcast. Give us a like, follow, comment, and share to continue the conversation and stay updated for future episodes. Follow Greg at Greg Justice. Thank you again, Greg, for joining us. For Greg Justice, Corey Smallwood, I'm Trey Belcher. Keep coaching from the heart and building strong communities.